Well, hello everyone. I'm Jordan Bateman. I am the Director of Communications for the Independent Contractors and Businesses Association, the mighty ICBA. Chris is away today in New York City, but I have replaced him with someone far better. I have replaced him with a legend in BC politics.
Far better looking?
Far better looking,
Yes.
smarter,
Thank you.
more bombastic. Usually with Chris, I'm
More
the
insightful. I would
more
use it to
insightful.
more insightful.
That's
yes.
right.
Yes.
Usually with Chris, I'm like the one who's like all energy and he's all calm. Now I get to be the calm one because I'm here with Phil Hochstein, past president of the ICBA, no stranger to anyone who's followed BC public policy or politics in the last 30 years, and the scourge of the NDP in the 1990s. Phil, thanks for coming.
Thank you for having me.
All right, good. So for 42 years, ICBA, we've been the voice of BC's construction and responsible resource development industries, a relentless and passionate advocate for free enterprise. This morning, 250,000 people got up to work in British Columbia. They went to work in construction, men and women who are contributing 9% of the BC economy. On this show, we talk about BC politics and economic issues, always from our free enterprise, free market perspective. And today we're going to talk Trans Mountain, we're going to talk Prop Rep, we're also going to talk U.S. trade. But Phil, I know like you and I have very similar views on government intervention in major construction projects, in proper private industry. This Trans Mountain decision this week was great for the 15,000 men and women who work on the project in construction, but does leave us some concerns about what happens next.
Yeah, I think the term I like best is it was a bittersweet kind of decision.
Yeah.
The fact that the government had to take the place of a private sector company who was willing to invest billions of dollars in the province and call that a success is just hard to understand, hard to fathom. I mean, clearly the private sector was willing to take those kinds of risks, but the risks became so great because it seemed to me lack of strong leadership at the federal level and certainly obstructionist kind of thoughts and talk and actions from the provincial level in British Columbia.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's lots of blame to go around. I think the original sin is John Horgan's, throwing up these roadblocks, this kind of passive-aggressive style that he's trying to give to the rest of Canada. He's not really trying to stop the pipeline, and yet everything he does, well, his whole premiership is predicated on him stopping the pipeline.
Well, I think it's unfortunate, strong leadership is at the provincial level ensures success at the federal level. And we just, for the British Columbia government to really stand in the way of a project that's been declared in the national interest is very, is very narrow-minded in terms of how the country needs to operate, how the country needs to function. And, frankly, I think it's disappointing to the business community at large to have a government in British Columbia that doesn't appear to be open to business.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's frustrating. I mean, I think you and I are of the general thought that if you can open a Yellow Pages, do they still have Yellow Pages? If you can go to yellowpages.ca
Yeah, that's right.
and you can find a service provided in there that government probably shouldn't be in that business.
Right.
We had a $7.5 billion investment on the line from a private company who did everything right. They got all these First Nations on board, 43 different agreements. They somehow herded the cats at the NEB. They somehow managed to get federal approval from a government that ran against them, but they made the case for it. They got provincial government approval that John Horgan's now ripped up. They did everything. 33,000 points of contact with First Nations people in British Columbia, and still, we wouldn't let them across the line.
Yeah, it's really the message it sends to international investors. I found it quite ironic when the government announced, this decision shows that the government will be in partnership with business for success. Well, first of all, most businesses are not interested in government as a partner. They didn't really need the partner to make it the partner with the public sector to make it happen. And now the public sector has really taken it over, and all of Canada is now shareholders in that. And what I worry about is that the private sector companies have pressure points that cause their action, but now up to all the pressure points because 2 weeks before the next federal election, and something important and controversial needs to happen in order to move the pipeline along, you just wonder if the government's going to say to the Crown Corporation, which they control, let's not do that now.
Yeah, hold up, yeah.
Yeah, and I think those kinds of decisions make the project even more expensive, even less economic, and that if we actually do sell it, we're not going to sell it for the value it should have achieved. So, it's bittersweet is sort of the nicest thing you can say about the decision, and you just wish the federal government took a stronger position on that. It's one thing to say, yeah, it's going to be built, but there was no actions to really be put behind those words, and it was a missed opportunity. It's going to cost us cost us reputationally, and cost us financially.
Yeah. Early on, you wonder if they'd realized the real threat. Horgan couldn't have been blunter. He was very clear, every tool in the toolbox to stop this pipeline project. They signed the governing agreement with the Green Party, the NDP, saying the same thing.
Yeah.
And yet for some reason, we could never get Bill Morneau or Justin Trudeau or Jim Carter to realize just, how entrenched this opposition was going to be. So.
Well, sometimes, once you get in, it's one thing to say things during an election campaign and when you're opposition, but when you're in government, the mantle of governing or the burden of governing tends to moderate some of the views you may have thought were important when you come in. Obviously, on this file, it really hasn't moderated their views, and I think the country is paying the price for that.
Yeah, and I think the difference is the fact that they rely on these 3 Green MLAs who are steadfast against this.
Yeah.
And the day he stops being against it is the day they vote him out of office.
All
right,
well, you know what?
Theoretically.
Let's face it, the NDP is a party that has to reconcile labor and environmentalists, which is difficult at the best of times.
Yeah.
And you'd think on this file, the reconciliation should be done in the Canadian national interest and not. Oh, sorry about that.
That's right. It's John Horgan saying you're being too tough on me, Phil.
Right. That's right. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no worries.
God, I'm embarrassed. But so as I was saying, you think the burden and the responsibility of governing would have moderated them somewhat, but clearly it hasn't, and for all the political reasons you said, but. Yeah, it's disappointing that Premier Horgan didn't do what's in the best interest of the country.
Yeah. Are we in for a long, hot summer of protests?
I think so. I think changing the owner is not going to change the view of the people that are opposed. My concern is that the way to deal with them now becomes even more complicated because it becomes a political issue more than just a business issue. And, it's going to take longer to build. And it takes strong leadership, and the feds haven't really exhibited strong leadership on this file. So I think, yes, long, hot summer emboldened the environmentalists to oppose this project and others coming forward.
By the way, Kinder Morgan 16 for 16 in court cases on this. 16 times court cases, challenges were brought against this project. 16 times they won in court.
It would be, given Horgan's position, it would be. Maybe too optimistic to say, well, if we lose this case, that'll be it. But he hasn't really said that. And I think that was the risk that Kinder Morgan just couldn't bear financially. But I wish he could say that, and then people say, okay, let's see what happens. But he hasn't said that, and that's unfortunate.
One last note, John Horgan in the media this week mused about how he could make gas prices cheaper for consumers, and one of the ideas was, having more supply of gasoline. Wouldn't a gas pipeline or some type of pipeline moving energy be helpful in that effort?
I thought
it's Horganomics for you.
I thought Premier Notley in Alberta said it best. On one hand, he wants to stop our oil, on the other hand, he wants our oil to come. You can't have it both ways.
No. Well, he tries, and we call it Horganomics around here. So. But I know, being a retired guy, you're much too, above the fray to use such a term as I do.
Yes.
Horganomics. Let's move from Horganomics to something that gives me the EBGBs, the David EBGBs. Proportional representation. David Eby, the Attorney General for the province of British Columbia, which still must appall many police officers who dealt with David Eby on civil liberties over the years, and his protest guides and whatnot. Anyways, Eby is the Attorney General of the province of British Columbia. He comes forward with the long-awaited proportional representation referenda question. John Horgan had promised a yes-no simple question, one system. Instead, we got a first past the post or proportional representation question, and then a second question with 3 proportional representation systems, 2 of which are not used anywhere in the world. They're completely experimental out of David Eby's brain. You can bet how favorable that they are to his particular political persuasion if they're coming out from his imagination.
Yeah.
And one that basically needs a lot more work. No maps, nothing as far as what ridings would look like. But in fairness, it looks like the media have really turned on this process hard.
Well, when you make such a fundamental change in our democracy, you'd think you'd want as much information out there as possible. You want people to make informed decisions about how they want to be governed and the method by which we elect our government. So, I think when the Liberals did their referendum, they did the right thing. They funded both sides amply, gave lots of time for the information to seep into the general public's mind.
It came from citizens. A citizen assembly was striking. It wasn't just Gordon Campbell dreaming something up.
So, I think it was, that's sort of the right way to approach it.
Yeah.
This way seems, that the fix is in, and they really want to do something that they have an outcome in mind rather than let the people decide the outcome. It's very, very disappointing. And the time frame and the spending limits are so short for such a significant change in how we elect people. I just think it's unfair to the people of British Columbia. It really asks too much of the people of British Columbia because you're not giving them the information. Democracy works best when people have the data, when have the information, and make informed choices, not when they're herded in one direction by an ideology. I think it's very unfortunate.
Yeah, we call it mushroom politics. They want to keep us in the barn, in the dark, and spread their what on us to make us grow.
Yeah.
It is problematic. I mean, you can see. We filmed this in my office, and so you see kind of a studio part if you're watching this on Facebook, but in front of me is kind of my to-do list workboard. You can see I have a calendar set up, kind of laying out things coming up in the rest of 2018, and Lord knows the NDP have enough things coming up in the rest of 2018. But essentially, we have Thanksgiving, October 12th to 15th. And then we go immediately into the municipal elections on October 20th. Every single mayor, councillor, school trustee, regional rep is up for grabs there. And then 2 days after that, literally 36 hours after polls close on the mayoralty elections, we go to the prop rep voting. It's unbelievable how much they're trying to shoehorn in here before the end of 2018.
Yeah, and frankly, I don't understand. Well, I understand politically the urgency of it, but I don't understand. Look, we've been governed under this system for a long time. To have another year, and there doesn't seem to be an election in the offing, really. So waiting another year as we get more information out, or 6 or 8 months, whatever it is, what's the problem with that? I don't really understand that. The urgency is a political one. Of the people that want to change, and to have that trump making an informed choice by the electorate seems it's just bad. It's bad government.
It is bad government. And look, politicians making up rules about how politicians are elected, they shouldn't be doing this because it's an inherent conflict of interest. And bluntly, and I've told BC Liberals this, and MLAs on both sides of the fence who are friends of mine, I don't want to hear from you during this campaign. You're politicians. You shouldn't be telling us how to elect politicians because you cannot be trusted to give a fair, independent answer.
Right.
And now we discover that of these 3 systems, if somehow we ended up selecting one in this referendum, it would be a panel of politicians who would set out the actual detailed rules. It's really frustrating.
Well, I mean, it is unfortunate. For a party that professes to be very democratic, very grassroots, to do a very top-down, heavy-handed approach to changing the fundamental way our democracy works is shocking.
Yeah, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Now, we should, I should give the pitch for First Past the Post. First Past the Post is a system that we've been electing people under since the 50s. It has worked for British Columbia. It has most of the time generated majority governments, meaning even when the majority governments that we didn't like the NDP in the 90s, there was still stability. There was a vision. You knew you could take government at their word. They weren't being wagged by a tail, which was what we're experiencing now. And look, there have been times when it has rendered minority governments, including this one, including one in W.A.C. Bennett's first term. So, these things do work. first past the post is the Westminster Standard. It's done throughout the British Commonwealth. Yes, there are some pockets that do proportional representation, but Italy's had something like 57 governments since World War II at a time where we've had 20. You tell me who's been able to kind of put together an agenda.
Well, two things for that one. Angela Merkel is one of the strongest leaders in Europe, where they have a prop rep kind of thing, and for 6 months, Germany had no government because they couldn't bring it together, and really what it leads to is backroom deals. Everybody argues that backroom deals are bad, and they're right. In government, taxpayers are really on the hook, so those deals shouldn't happen. It should be in the public. But the prop rep leads to a bunch of backroom deals: who gets what position you get, who leads, and I just don't think it works. And as you said, it leads to the election of a lot of fringe parties, parties are the sort of one issue kind of parties, and then they decide, usually social policies in a way that the majority of the rest of the province wouldn't want, but because you need their votes, you have to sort of pacify them, and that's not That's not the way I thought democracy worked. This is not democratic. This is anti-democratic.
No, exactly. Takes away representation as well from the north, because in order to match the number of MLAs to the percentage of the vote across the province, you have to take those MLAs from somewhere. So the north will see larger ridings. Think of Prince George. Right now, it's split into 2 ridings. Shirley Bond is the MLA from Prince George all the way to the Alberta border, Valemont. Mike Morris is the MLA for the other half of Prince George all the way to Mackenzie. Now you would have one MLA from Mackenzie through Prince George all the way to the border. You're talking about 16 or 18 hours worth of driving in order to get from one end to the other.
Possible.
You're talking about, and that's one of the better ridings in the north because it has the largest city in the north. So.
The other thing is, I don't think the population will know who their MLA really is, because I think the part of it is the party appoints the people that go in. So like, who do you hold accountable?
Yeah.
I mean, you hold the party accountable. Do you hold the party person
do
you hold the person the party said is going to represent you? But if they owe their right to be an MLA to the party and not to the electorate, then how does that make any sense? So I think that individual citizens lose even more control over the political process, and how that is helpful, how that is democratic is really beyond me.
Like, first past the post is not perfect, but it reminds me of the Churchill quote, democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others.
No,
first past the post might be the best form of democracy, or the worst form of democracy except for all the others. So it works out well. One more thing, U.S. trade, and Phil, can you explain Donald Trump to me? No, obviously everything is falling apart. America seems to have just completely lost the confidence of all of its allies, including Canada. But the bottom line here in this U.S. versus the world trade dispute, it's going to be higher costs on everything for Canadians, isn't it?
Yeah, I think that's, I think there's 2 things. I think when countries trade with one another, they don't usually fight and throw bombs at each other. So I think having multilateral trade agreements help keep world peace going. And we all want that. I don't know anybody who doesn't. So, and that's just one of the tactics or tools that allows that to happen. If you're in a business relations with someone and you're benefiting and they're benefiting, you don't want to blow that up in any way. So I think trade is important from a sense of peace in the world. The other thing is that at the end of the day, the trade works in the best interest of the consumer. At the end of the day, when you put tariffs on things, you may protect that particular industry in that country, but you raise the price for everybody else. And I think the construction industry is very vulnerable to that. When they put tariffs on steel and other building materials, at the end of the day, our affordability crisis in the province simply gets exacerbated. It's really a bad, I think Trump's position on trade is it's an old vision, and the jobs that he's trying to protect, frankly, aren't coming back. I heard a stat the other day, because of the trade relationships, maybe they've lost 2 out of 10 jobs in the States, but the other 8 of them have been lost through automation, and those jobs aren't coming back.
Yeah.
So unfortunately, I think he's overestimating the benefits of repatriating some of the trade products that he's given up in the past. And at the end of the day, the Americans are going to suffer. They're going to pay more for their own products.
Yeah, and we'll end up paying more too. I mean, we've seen this before in the construction industry. I mean, cement, for example, when the carbon tax came in, it became cheaper for people to import powdered cement from the States rather than have a thriving concrete industry here in BC. Never made sense.
No.
You know, you can talk about steel, rebar. I know you did a lot of work on this.
Yeah, the tariffs, and right now the U.S., because of the tariffs just announced, the supply and price of rebar in British Columbia will be very constrained. And I don't know if we're going to have enough to actually continue the construction activity we've got between quotas on non-U.S. steel rebar coming into the province and the tariffs in the U.S. on the rebar. Means the U.S. mills are going to continue to service their own thing over us. So the U.S. supply is not going to get bigger, it's going to get smaller. And if it does come, it's more expensive. And in the meantime, Canada's trying to shut off the supply from other countries other than the States. I mean, man, we have so many self-inflicted wounds in this country in terms of trying to get our economy going and prospering. It's just staggering.
Yeah. Well, I mean, as part of the Confidence in Canada movement, we've been kind of many of the business groups have been noodling around with the idea of a competition summit, a competitiveness summit, because we think this is the key issue that pulls in Trans Mountain and pulls in trade issues. Yeah. The problem is, Philip, like we have 1,000 different topics we could put on it.
Yeah.
You know, steel rebar is one, cement, you know, it just goes on and on. All these things, farmland, we haven't talked about, you know, supply demand management and all of these things. So very problematic, and we just seem to be twiddling our thumbs in Ottawa and in Victoria and other places, not really understanding that all of these taxes, all these tariffs, all of these things both within our control and outside our control are making it more difficult.
I think Canadians generally overestimate the importance of Canada. Canada is a very small nation, trading nation that relies on good relationships with the rest of the world and open markets so that all our resources can be sold and in return bring in finished goods that we all love, televisions, phones, and all those kinds of things, computers. And unless we remain competitive in those areas, we're not going to be able to afford phones and TVs because you have to create wealth in order to use it to buy the things you want. And that requires, good taxation policies, good government that you can rely on with certainty, rule of law, the things that make stability and make people wanting to invest here. We don't have a rule of law, it appears, when protesters continue to shut down projects that have been approved by the whole regulatory system. We've self-inflicted wounds with carbon taxes and all that. And even if those, an economy that seems to be the dream of the people in Ottawa at the moment, so maybe we will get there. But we gotta live through the short term. People gotta eat in the short term. And I think they're forgetting the short term game and just focusing on the long term. And in the meantime, without a short game, we're never gonna get to the long game.
Exactly. How's retirement treating you?
Great. Yeah.
Philip highly recommends retirement to
I don't know why you wait till you're old to do it. You should do it when you're much younger. But
you're playing golf? What are you doing?
I'm playing golf and pickleball and traveling and yoga and
yoga.
I'm a Renaissance kind of guy.
Yeah, so all of a sudden now you're a flexible guy.
Flexible
the
guy,
90s NDP will be shocked to hear.
That's right. No, I really enjoy it. I enjoy my connection with ICBA and some of the other things I'm doing. Frankly, to your listeners, I enjoy not having responsibility and accountability except to myself. And after 30 years and God knows how many boards of directors and thousands of members, it's nice to have a little less of that responsibility.
Fair enough. Hey, you going to golf with us August 1st? Are you in town? ICBA Open?
Maybe.
I have the Philip Hochstein trophy in my office. When we renamed it after you last year, you'll recall this. You told me that you were worried that people would think you're dead. So it'd be good for you to be there. It'd be good for you to be there. It'd be good for you to be there.
Although there was a Russian guy who just recently wasn't there.
Yeah, exactly.
They said he was dead, and the next day he was
crazy.
So that's what'll happen with
That's
me.
happening. And then just as we were coming on, the news broke. Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un, the summit's back on. So
good.
He's fighting with all his friends, but his enemies get a summit. So
that's right.
It's Trump's world. We just live in it, folks. All right, thanks for listening. ICBA.ca, at ICBABC on Twitter, Facebook.com/the ICBA. We'll be back next week where I will grill Chris Gardner about the beauty of Uber. You can bet he was using that in New York City.
I hope so.
Yeah, why don't we have Uber here? It's pretty simple. It's an industry protecting itself and making sure the politicians
Political decisions over economic, what's best for the public.
Yeah, and those always work out just great for us,
Exactly.
Of course, tax-paying schmucks. So stay tuned for more content next week. Think of this week, it was crazy. We had the payroll tax, we had Kinder Morgan, we had the U.S. trade, we had prop rep. Lord only knows what the NDP has in store for the poor, suffering taxpayers of British Columbia next week. If they keep making life more affordable this way, they're going to afford us right out of BC. Stop. It's affordable. Just don't do anything else. So thanks for watching, and we will touch base soon.